training our tech to be fairer than humans. I'm Tonya Hall, and joining me is Dr. Ayanna Howard, roboticist, chair of the School of Interactive Computing at Georgia Tech, and founder and CTO at Zyrobotics. Welcome, Dr. Howard.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Give us a brief summary of your professional resume, especially as it relates to robotics.
So I have been a roboticist for now over 25 years. My first robot was designed and built when I was an undergrad. I actually worked at JPL in the summer after my freshman year, and I've done robotics even before it was cool. Now it's cool, but back then it was just my passion, and it's what I wanted to do like my entire career, my entire life.
What does it mean to train your technology to be fairer than humans?
So one of the things that I've seen lately is that as AI and robotics is more widely deployed in the world with people, the public, a lot of times as technologists, we're not really as conscious of any of the biases that are in it. And so what are the biases? Biases are basically, I might treat different individuals in different ways. I work a lot in pediatric robotics, which means I work with kids. A lot of the systems out there aren't trained for kids because they're a vulnerable population. And so these systems are out there and they don't treat people equally. So that's why we say these algorithms could be unfair.
Humans seem to develop relationships with machines, even as simple as robot vacuums. In fact, I interviewed a military roboticist once who told of a story of the officer stopping the test of minefield sweeper robot after the robot started to get damaged and losing its limbs. They just felt bad. So what does it mean to be more accountable in our relationships with robots, especially considering these types of examples?
Yeah, so robots have a weird relationship with people. And there's an extreme. So it used to be thought that it's only emotional robots, right? Because what they're doing and when we design them, they're tapping into our understanding of human behaviors and emotions. And so you could think of, okay, we understand that, like, because we understand your characteristics. And so we're building on top of that to enhance trust, to enhance that relationship. But we're seeing that individuals are even becoming connected to things that aren't emotional. But think about this though, as people, we've become connected to technology. Like how many of us didn't name our first car, right? Like, come on, it's a car, right? But a lot of us, I remember a couple of times, it's like, okay, come on, I know you can do this, Betsy. I know you can get me over this hill, right? It was like their special kind of gadget. That has moved on to these robots that are not only are in some cases are lifesavers, but they also become this entity where we are dependent on them. And so we have this bond with them.
How are our algorithms learning from our behavior and our biases, in fact?
Well, so our systems are based on data that's historic, which basically means that we already have a bias lens. And I'll give an example. If I have a system that is working on diagnosis, so again, I said I work in pediatric robotics, I work in the therapy space. I have this data about outcomes of certain patients, for example. We know already that a lot of the medical practices had a biases with respect to women, right? Like women have different ways of, in terms of heart attacks, they have different ways of different symptoms, right? But that data we've just now realized. But imagine we're creating a system over 20 years of data that did not recognize that women exhibit these symptoms differently. We create an AI system that then recognizes it, or a robotic system that recognizes these symptoms. They're basing it on bad data. You now have a bias system that's being deployed in the world, in society, and is going to get it wrong.
Where is the AI and robotics industry headed regarding ethics and fairness? The EU and other European NGOs are working on ethics standards and guidelines. So, will we see that in the US or globally soon? Will we see these kind of guidelines happen?
Yeah, so I'm actually excited because there's a lot of interest in making sure we do it right, because there have been mistakes already in the past, and the mistakes have been on systems that really haven't had a drastic outcome. Okay, so my system may not recognize my face if I'm trying to open up my computer, right? Like that's not a really high risk application. But now what happens if you take that same application and you're putting it into the airports, right? Or you're putting it into the school systems? Well, now you're talking about a person's autonomy and their dignity. And so we really have to do it right. So we have not only governments that are looking at this, like the EU, trying to figure out how do you ensure that when systems comes out, there's a check and balance list, that there's some understanding of its ability to have mitigated bias. What can you use these systems for or not? There's places in the US, it's been local governments primarily that have made rules about facial recognition and when officials should use it for, say, understanding or putting it into the police departments. So we're starting to do this at many, many different levels. There's not yet one unified global initiative, but there's a lot of small players to larger players that are putting this together. I'm happy because we're moving in the right direction, but it's a lot.
Dr. Ayanna Howard, roboticist and chair of the School of Interactive Computing at Georgia Tech, and founder and CTO of Zyrobotics. If somebody wants to connect with you, how can they do that?
You can connect with me on Twitter, in fact, Robot Smarts.
Thanks so much for joining us, Ayanna, and we appreciate your insight.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And find more of my interviews right here or at tonyahall.net. Thanks for watching.